Dead Presidents podcast is brought to you in part by John G. Camp, who has this important message. Caution! All persons are hereby cautioned against cutting or carrying off wood of any description from my land, as I am determined to prosecute with the utmost rigor of the law any person violating this caution. Okay, listeners, party's over. I know we've all been sneaking onto John G. Camp's land to pilfer a log or two to keep the fire going, but it's gotta stop.
Gotta stop.
Look, if I'm being honest, I heated my house all last winter on his wood, and I had no right.
Well,
listeners, we can't keep doing this. It's just plain trespassing. That's a final warning from our sponsor, John G. Camp.
Thanks, John, and sorry. Now an important message from our sponsor, John Lechler. Whereas my wife Mary has left my bed and board, having defiled my matrimonial bed in the most scandalous manner, this notice is therefore to forewarn all and every person not to trust my said wife on my account, as I am determined not to pay any more debts of her contracting. There you have it, listeners. Mary Lechler has treated her matrimonial bed like it's John G. Camp's land, and has taken some wood that she had no business taking. She's behaved in the most scandalous manner. Picture the dirtiest, vilest, most depraved acts of wanton infidelity you could imagine. And that's what Mary Lechler was doing in the very bed where John Lechler lays his head down to sleep after a hard day's work to support his family. Think about that. When Mary Lechler asks to borrow money, and tell her to get lost. That's a message from our sponsor, John Lechler.
Now a word from our sponsor, Barnabas O'Farrell. Houses and lots in Hillsborough for sale. 12-acre lots, well situated and contiguous with excellent springs, houses, and improvements. I also give notice that my wife Nancy O'Farrell, having for some years quit my bed and board without any just cause, and having abandoned herself to a lewd and licentious life, I hereby forbid all persons from giving her credit or trading with her on my account, as I will pay no debts by her contracted. Come on, listeners. Barney O'Farrell is going through a rough time right now.
Indeed.
You ought to think about buying a house or a lot from him. He could use the boost. These properties are well situated, and Hillsborough is a nice neighborhood.
It is.
Not like the dens of iniquity frequented by that reprobate Nancy O'Farrell and the debauched crowd she runs with. Her husband
true.
Barney is good people, and he needs a win right about now. Houses and lots for sale in Hillsborough by our sponsor, long-suffering cuckold Barnabas O'Farrell.
Update. This just in. Breaking news and a very important message from our latest sponsor, Samuel Carpenter, the mayor of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Proclamation. Whereas a most horrid outrage and murder was committed in the city of Lancaster between the hours of 12 and 1 o'clock on Mary Lechler, wife of John Lechler, and Sarah Haig, wife of Bernhard Haig, by strangling and hanging the former, and by shooting the latter, and it is believed that the said John Lechler, who has since absconded, was the perpetrator of the said atrocious crimes. Wherefore, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the said city, by the select and common councils, I hereby offer a reward of $200 for the apprehension and securing of the said John Lechler in any jail, so that he may be brought to trial. The said John Lechler is supposed to be about 37 years of age, of middle stature, about 5 feet 8 inches high, has dark hair, a scar on one cheekbone below the eye, has also had his jaw broken, which has twisted his mouth. He speaks very rapidly, so much so that he often appears confused and repeats his words. He left this city on horseback. His horse was iron gray with a new saddle, but these he may change. Listeners, our sponsor, John Lechler, stands accused of brutally murdering his wife and another woman. And now he's vanished. Keep your eyes peeled, because there's $200 in it for you, if you could catch him. Alas, how shall this bloody deed be answered? We'll be sure to keep you updated on this developing story right here on the Dead Presidents Podcast. The Dead Presidents Podcast is brought to you in part by Solomon Porter. For sale, 49 hogsheads of good old rum and 2 pounds of sugar, imported in the brig Columbine by Solomon Porter. Listeners, did you know a hogshead is a barrel? Solomon Porter is sitting on 49 hogsheads of good old rum. Not the cheap stuff, James. This stuff is from the West Indies, and you know it's high quality when it comes from Solomon Porter. He is the official importer of the Dead Presidents Podcast. Listeners, do you want to be the life of the party? Of course you do. So get yourself a hogshead of good old rum today. It's gonna sell out quick.
Now an important message from our sponsor, Stephen Kimball. Whereas my wife, Esther Matilda, has eloped from my bed and board without any just provocation and refused to return, therefore I forbid all persons harboring or trusting her on my account, as I will not pay any debts of her contracting after this date. Oh, I can't believe this. How could she so coldly ignore his pleas to return to his bed and board? Wait, what's this? Oh, I'm told we have a new last-minute sponsor.
Oh, whoa.
It is Esther Matilda Kimball, who has an important message of her own in response to that last ad.
This is wild.
To Stephen Kimball, you accuse me of eloping? Who should not when you have turned me out of doors? Your bed I never left, for you had none, unless you call a bottle of rum a bed.
Ooh!
Board was not much, for you had not much to eat.
Oh.
You might have saved the cost of advertising, for no person will trust you on your own account, and I forbid any persons trusting you on mine, as I will pay no debts of your contracting.
Wow!
I write this to let people know that if I was foolish for marrying you, that your ill usage has learnt me some wit.
Damn!
Oh my God, Esther Matilda Kimball dropping a wicked burn.
Wicked
on Stephen
burn.
Kimball. He's just been lambasted in full view of the public. He'll undoubtedly take solace with his only remaining friend, the Demon Rum.
Yeah, he's been savaged.
Luckily, Solomon Porter has hogsheads upon hogsheads of the stuff, more than enough to drown the sorrows of our unfortunate sponsor, Stephen Kimball.
Well, he could have at that. Crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. And we're used to seeing that on the Dead Presidents Podcast, but, well, we're not used to seeing something this crazy, James. We have an incredible update here.
New sponsor?
Yeah. We're sponsored, and we're proud to be sponsored, by Samuel Carpenter, who was just published and made available for sale, The Dying Confession of John Lechler. You remember our sponsor, John Lechler, accused of double murder? Well, he's been apprehended, tried, convicted, and hanged by the neck until dead. but not before he wrote a full confession of his most grievous crimes, which we have hot off the presses.
Yeah, it seems that on the night of September 25th, 1821, John Lechler came home early from a business trip to find his wife Mary in a most compromised state.
Oh, dear.
With his close friend and neighbor, Bernard Haig. She admitted that the affair had been going on for 18 months.
Oh, dear.
Haig offered Lechler $400 to keep the matter quiet, lest it ruin both their families. But Lechler would have none of that, and he placed the ad that you heard earlier on our show.
That's right.
Mary Lechler proposed a separation, but he refused, knowing she'd just end up back in bed with Bernard Haig. John Lechler tried to get on with life, but it was too much to bear, and he swore revenge. It all came to a tragic climax on the night of April 1st, 1822. Here's an excerpt from The Dying Confession of John Lechler.
I jumped around and fastened both my hands at my wife's throat. She murmured out hoarsely as if straining for breath. I dragged her out of the bed on the floor and still continued holding her by the throat. I rocked it a little and it was quiet. I think my wife would have came to life again, but I immediately took her right hand in mine and put my foot on her throat as she lay on the floor until I thought she was dead. I dragged the body over the garret floor to the workbench, put the rope round her neck, and hung her up to the collar beam, where I left her in the manner she was found hanged by the witnesses. I then took two of my pistols and ran toward Lancaster with an intention to shoot Haig. I came down the back alley behind his house, jumped over the fence, and went up the stairs into the kitchen. I made a rattling among the kitchen furniture, thinking to get Haig to come out. He would not come out, but I heard him approach the door, and he said, "Who's out there?" "That you, Lechler, you son of a bitch?" He was in at the door, and I moved softly towards it and placed my pistols one at each side about the height of a man's breast, thinking to make sure of killing him. I pulled the triggers at once, and both went off. I then ran out as fast as possible.
Lechler was later captured at the home of his sister, and only then did he learn that the person felled by his bullets was not the loathsome Bernard Haig, but his totally innocent wife, Sarah Haig. With his last words, John Lechler said,
"My mother used to tell me when I was a boy that I would be hung. I never paid any attention to her or cared what she told me. Poor woman prophesied too true. I shudder when I think of it. And I have nothing more to do on earth but to prepare for eternity. I deserve my fate. I forgive all my enemies, and I hope they will forgive and pity the unfortunate Lechler. I will now prepare to die, and bid the world an affectionate farewell."
That's just a taste of the 16-page Dying Confession of John Lechler, for sale by our sponsor, Samuel Carpenter. All proceeds benefit the Lechler's children.
Yeah.
Did you know the Lechlers had 6 children, all now orphans? Did you know that the youngest of those children looks suspiciously like Bernard Haig?
Ooh.
You can find out all the juicy details if you check us out on Twitter at Dead Prez Podcast. That's Prez with a Z, where we have the actual Dying Confession of John Lechler as published during James Monroe's presidency.
You don't want to miss that.